Hello, everybody. It's Tori, and welcome to the second episode of the Dorm Debrief podcast. Alright, you guys, so today's topic is going to be what it means to outgrow somebody and how to handle that maturely. And I'm going to be really honest with y'all, I've been thinking about this topic a lot for the past, I would say, few weeks. Something that was not really weighing heavy on my heart, but something that I was just thinking about a lot. So I wanted to shed light to it today. I'm not going to lie to y'all, I am feeling really, really tired, exhausted. I've been going to bed super late recently. But you know what? I only allow positive vibes, high energy on this podcast. So that's what I'm going to give y'all, my best self. So let's get straight into today's topic. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm so glad that you guys are tuning in and watching this today. Today's topic, we're really going to get right into it, is talking about how to know when you've outgrown somebody and how to handle those situations maturely. I'm not going to lie to y'all, I've been thinking about this a lot of friendships in my life. I've been thinking about this and correlating it to also just past things I've had to deal with. So I was like, why not shed light to it in today's episode? So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so regarding this topic, the first thing that we're really going to touch on is really what does it mean to outgrow somebody and what does it look like? So I wrote down a few things, kind of bullet pointed it, what it means to me, especially what I've seen in certain relationships, and let's go through those. So the first thing, it would be if you are moving forward and they are stagnant. You know, I'm a very goal ambitious person. To all my goal ambitious people out there, you're never really living a slow life, and when you're living that slow life, you feel like you're not doing enough, you feel lazy, you feel unmotivated, and it's like you constantly feel like you have to pick up the slack or you have to go do something or else this won't happen and da-da-da-da, right? So I always feel like not only do I move fast, but I really like to get things done and I have my eye on the prize. I know what I want and I'm not going to let anything stop me. And it's kind of like with those people who they're kind of stagnant in their life. They're complacent is the word. They're okay with being at a certain point and not really wanting better for themselves, wanting to move forward. And I'm not necessarily saying that it's bad to be complacent. It's great to be complacent. I can say that I'm comfortable and I'm okay with the place in life that I am now. But that doesn't mean I don't want more for myself. And so specifically, I'm talking about people who are not really goal-oriented and they don't really want more for themselves, which ultimately makes it really, really hard to grow with those people. So to move on to the other thing that I wrote down was their ideas, beliefs, and practices no longer fulfill or resonate with you. So I would say this is the one that I've realized the most in a lot of my friendships, and especially transitioning, from kind of adolescence to adulthood, you realize that a lot of people still have those childish characteristics and they haven't really let them go, going from high school to college, this and that. So when I'm realizing in relationships with people and talking with people is that they might have kind of a childish mindset or they don't really know how to go out and get things and do things for themselves. And it's kind of there's only so much you can do. You're not their parent. It is not your responsibility to kind of force people to go up with you. And that's kind of one thing I also want to hint at as well, is that, not only as a genuine human being, but for all my believers out there as a child of God, we are made to help people and not to condemn them. But it is when people don't want what's good for themselves, they don't want what's better for them, or quote unquote, they just don't want to be better as a person. They don't want to put the effort in, and they're okay with just, like I said earlier, staying stagnant and being complacent. Then there's only so much you can do, and it is no longer your responsibility to cater towards those people. Which means that ultimately you might have to cut those people off in order for you to grow. So to kind of give you guys a little bit of an example of how there's a difference in beliefs and practices and how that can contribute to you outgrowing somebody. Me personally, I felt that a lot in relationships where we were kind of unequally yoked when it comes to religion. And when I say that, I mean, I am a firm believer in God and Jesus. But I will never, absolutely never force that on anybody who's watching this podcast. And if you don't believe, that is completely fine. You are welcome here. That has nothing to do with you. That's just my own personal belief, right? So with that, I was like having problems because I had friends who were not believers, and that was okay. But when I started enhancing my faith with God and really, getting closer to God, I was so happy and joyous, and all I would want to do was really kind of like talk about my experience, and I would always get shut down. It would always be kind of this like negative connotation when they would address it at me. So those were really people that I didn't really want to be around, not because the difference of belief necessarily, but it was because we couldn't accept each other for what we are and be happy for each other, knowing that we believe in different things. Okay, so the next one is a little bit on the minor scale, but it can also be a great indicator to know if you've outgrown somebody. And that's just like, when you guys hang out, a shift in energy. You notice a shift in energy, not only in person, maybe over the phone. And when I say this, I'm not specifically talking about this one situation, but it could be a situation where, you guys are in person and the energy just isn't there, and it's like constant. Every hangout, you kind of have to uplift your spirit to go and see them. And honestly, like, I don't want to have to uplift my spirit and hype myself up to go see somebody every single time. So for me, that's just an indicator that maybe we're just not meant to be in a relationship with each other anymore, and that's okay. But hopefully that puts things a little bit into perspective for you guys. Not saying that's the end all be all, but that's just another indicator. Okay, so the last thing I want to touch on when it comes to how to know when you've outgrown somebody is when they don't push you to be your best self. So for all my, like I said in the beginning, my goal-oriented people who want to get stuff done, people who have a vision and stick with that vision, if you have a friend that not only is not supportive, but they're not really doing something for themselves, and they're kind of not only not reliant, but they're not supportive, they're not helping you, they're not a helping hand when need, that's really not someone you want to be around. Someone who doesn't uplift you in that process of getting your goals. I feel like, yes, that is common sense, but at the same time, a lot of us are in these tricky situations, and I just want to say that just to really, really be clear with you guys on what that is, and that this is a very, very strong indicator that maybe that's not someone you want to have in your life anymore, and that's okay. Okay, so with everything being said, we're going to shift focus a little bit, and we're going to kind of talk about my personal experience with outgrowing people and kind of what I've noticed in certain relationships. So I would say the first thing, I'm going to think about a few people that I'm actually no longer friends with. But, these were actually, amazing people. Obviously, everyone has their downfalls, but they also have their redeeming qualities. So, I'm not going to, obviously, there's no name dropping. These are, like, great people. But, in my experience in friendships with them, I've realized that a lot of these friendships were very, quote-unquote, unequally yoked. Meaning that I felt like I was so full of life and full of spirit and always doing for them. That's another indicator. I should have put that on the list. But always doing for them, kind of like wanting more for myself. And I kind of felt like these people were weighing me down. So it got to a point where I was like, I don't really know what to do because I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to be, quote unquote, the bad guy, but I need to do what's best for me. And like, I don't feel supported and I don't feel loved by these people. The energy doesn't feel reciprocated. So eventually what I had to do was just like, well, one of them I had to send a text message, and it was very, very long. The girls know we love our long text messages. But I had to send a text message and just be like, hey, like, very mature about it, saying, I enjoy time with you. But, as I was looking at our relationship, I realized that there were some things that I feel like we're not so head on with. And I really think that it's best for me to leave this relationship behind just so that I can prosper and grow in my own personal life. And that's really all it needs to be. Especially when it comes to close friends, they deserve more of an explanation is what I believe, right? But when it comes to people who are more of like just friends or acquaintances, really don't stress too much about that, you guys. Like, there's so many people in this world, like, you got to do what's best for you and keep it moving and keep it pushing. So that's kind of how I handled one of the situations. The other situation, I actually had a face-to-face conversation because I do think that's better. And just basically saying the same thing, like, hey, like, I do care for you. I do have love for you. But at the same time, I have to choose me. And I don't think that this relationship really fulfills me anymore. And it's really that simple. And I know, like, it doesn't sound that simple because, to be honest, I'm going to contradict myself really quick. It's not when it comes to like the moral and psychological aspect. It's a lot of like, build up to come to that decision and maybe some anxiety. But once you do it, you realize that it really is that simple and you can just say bye-bye. So another thing I kind of want to touch on as I go into how I approach these certain situations is, say if you're in a position where like it's kind of sticky, it's a little bit complicated, but you still want this person in your life. You don't think that you necessarily need to cut them off, but you do think that, there needs to be some level of respect, some boundaries. So my advice would be to create those boundaries. I I actually kind of lack in that area. I'm not necessarily good at creating boundaries. Maybe I haven't allowed myself to have the opportunity to create those boundaries. I'm more of a communicate, and like if it doesn't work, then communicate again. Then if it doesn't work, communicate again. And then when I realize that person just really doesn't care, then I'm gonna be like, all right, peace. You know what I'm saying? And that is really how it is for a lot of us. But I would say especially for me, going into the new year and new relationships and anyone else to come, would be creating boundaries from the start. And just saying like, hey, like, it doesn't have to be really awkward, but just saying like, hey, like, I expect this certain level of respect. Wow, that's a tongue twister. I respect this level of respect. I ... this, and leave it at that. And you would kind of realize that, in the beginning you set these boundaries, and throughout the friendship, throughout the relationship, you realize, do they respect these or not? And it's really also that simple, again, but I really wanted to just put that out there, that respecting boundaries is another thing that you want to look out for, and that you also have to set those boundaries. Okay, so another thing I kind of want to hint at just before we move on to the next topic, and we're going to talk about this further down the line in another episode when we talk about relationships, which I'm actually so excited for it. Like, everybody knows I love to talk about relationships, like, especially like, not platonic, I don't know what the word for that is, but like non-platonic relationships. But to speak about non-platonic relationships now, and honestly, if you're watching this and you want it for your own relationship, you want advice for like an actual relationship, then that's what it can be for too. But at the same time, I do want to mention the importance of leaving maturely and leaving quietly. And when I say leaving quietly, I don't mean like not setting boundaries. I don't mean like, letting stuff slide. What I mean by that is leaving maturely, like being the bigger person. And so it doesn't involve like doing all the rah-rah, doing this back and forth on text messages, the arguing, the cussing each other out, the posting on social media. Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to be real. If you're still doing that at your big age, then maybe we need to backtrack a little bit, because as adults, I feel like we should not be doing that. And we are now at the age where we should become the bigger person. So that's another thing I really kind of want to engrave in people's minds, is it is so, so important to leave maturely, not only for the fact like of your own peace, but also people will look at that, whether they appreciate it in the moment or not. They will look at that later down the line, say like, I don't know, 30 years later, and be like, dang, like I might have lost a good one, or that might have been like a good friend, that I lost because of my actions, because of how they handled it, right? Like she's gonna or he's gonna look back and be like, wow, like they actually handled that really, really maturely. Maybe I should have done better. So to kind of end the video, the last thing I want to talk about is how to become comfortable with making these decisions within yourself, right? So really what it comes down to is acceptance. I know a lot of us, I know for me especially, I can be really, really hard on myself sometimes when it comes to cutting people off and doing what's best for me, because I always feel like the bad guy, and I'm afraid, honestly, to have people see me as the bad guy. Like, I think of myself, not even to be quote unquote cocky, but like I know who I am. I'm a very sweet and giving and caring person, and sometimes, honestly, I fall into the trap of hating the fact that other people don't think of me that way. And you kind of have to come to acceptance with yourself, knowing who you are and knowing that some people are going to dislike you for doing what's best for you. And it is what it is. Honestly, some people will dislike you for just being you, right? But it comes to a level of acceptance, and you have to allot yourself the time to heal and to really go through these emotions when it comes to cutting off these close friendships or relationships. It's okay, like genuinely. And for my guys too, like it's okay to feel. Like, don't go out and like get with other girls or like try to impress or whatever you guys do. Like don't do that. Allow yourself to feel. For my ladies and for my men, it's okay to feel for certain situations, genuinely. But at the same time, at a certain point, you have to stop ruminating on these things. Like, you can't allow your brain to constantly go through the cycles. Like the same thing I was talking about in the other video about social media and how you would see sad posts and it just kept coming and coming and coming. You can't allow your brain to do the same thing. Don't feed into those sad things. Like, really try to look at the situation for what it is, keep it moving, and keep it pushing. All right, you guys, that is all for today's podcast episode. I really, really hope you found some value and enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next Monday.